Forward and back. Okay. Hi, you guys. First, I'm going to have a confession for you guys. As Jason mentioned, I had a film premiering, world premiere of my first documentary just a few days ago. So it's been a super busy week. And if you're like me, most of you put a lot of things on your calendar. You think you can do it all. And then it all comes to that same week, and you're a little behind. So I want you to know I'm not as prepared as I would like to be. As a professional athlete, I like to come to the table very prepared, but please know that any fumbles I might have is in no way representative of the message I want to tell you or my desire to be here. So that's my confession. What I'm going to talk about today is I'm a professional athlete, professional cyclist. I ride for long, long distances on my bike, and I want to talk a little bit about how I'm using the bike as a vehicle for change. So first off, happy birthday to the bicycle. It's the 200th anniversary of the invention of the bicycle this year. So any cyclists in this room? I hope so. Okay, if not, we can change that. And I wanted to talk a little bit, think for a moment what your bike means to you. And it's such an amazing vehicle for connecting people and connecting places. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. The bike was developed to fill a need for people to move efficiently, to go places, and it still is that today. In many developing countries, there are more two-wheeled vehicles than four-wheeled vehicles. It evolved after that into a toy, which is a lot of ways that I use it, a toy for recreation, for racing, for fun. And when it was first developed in the mid-1800s, Susan B. Anthony called the bike a freedom machine. So this is my first freedom machine. And it really has opened up a world for me. So everybody's ridden a bike as a kid. So imagine that first moment, you got the training wheels off, and I remember it really distinctly. I had a purple Huffy. It was a different bike than this. And the moment when I realized that my mom had let go of the banana seat, and it was just me, like, oh, I'm doing it. That moment, that emotion of freedom was so palpable. And I know that everybody has that feeling. They all have it. And suddenly my world was expanded beyond my block, and eventually it expanded so much that I had to move into my car with my bicycle, and that's where I lived for a while, out of the Bronco. And so my world expanded beyond my block to the next state, to the rest of the country, and eventually to the world. But what happens to a lot of us at 16, it changes, and we get a car. We leave the bicycle behind, and that's your vehicle for exploration. And for those of us who found our way back to the bicycle, all of those who raised your hand and you came back and you ride a bike now as an adult, scientifically, you're happier people. So it's actually proven that the bike checks a lot of boxes for us that wellness and happiness scientists talk about, that we need social engagement, health and wellness, sensation-seeking, accomplishment, flow, strength. We need those things. And so ride a bike, be happy. It's that simple. So I wanted to be happy so much and I had this need to go faster, to win races, to go further. And so I made a career out of riding my bike, being outside, riding around the world, and using my bike to explore. And what I found pretty soon, I was exploring externally, but also exploring internally, and finding myself on the bike. First, it was travel and escape. Then it became an addiction. My bike became an addiction to win, to achieve goals, to go further, to go faster, to check off trophies. And everyone sitting in this room is an overachiever and can probably relate to what it's like to kind of going crazy, achieving your goals, and grabbing, and when is it enough? And okay, I'm going to win this, then I'm going to grab that. Everyone in this room has really gone for it in whatever field that you're in. So you might understand my intense quest to keep winning races. And it's great. It's addictive. I love winning. Most people do. It's great to stand on the top of the podium, to look back on the hard work that you put in, and have people pat you on the back. It's pretty cool. But it became an exhausting hamster wheel, running and running and running. And as soon as I'd finish one race like this, winning, hands in the air, somebody asked me, what's next, what's next, what's next? And it was exhausting. And I started to figure out that extreme performance doesn't always equal extreme happiness. Ride a bike, be happy. Win doesn't always mean be happy. So what happens, we reach a point in our careers where the goals that you set forth are in the rearview mirror. So then how do you find the motivation to keep pushing really, really hard when you've already achieved what you set out to do? That's when evolution happens. Everybody's seen this before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And hopefully most of us are sitting up on that top shelf there. All of us, I know, are on the second to top shelf. We've taken care of, food and water and shelter and self-esteem. That's where a lot of people sit. Winning trophies, winning medals, building a giant business that's successful, making money. And that's a cool place to hang out for a while. But pretty soon you start realizing that celebrating your own success isn't much of a celebration, and it feels pretty lonely. So what I want to talk to you about today is that whatever field you're in, the impact that we can make, big or small, and you may not have any idea where that's coming from, but it's out there. And thinking about what kind of imprint you want to leave, what kind of legacy do you want to leave. I have a house full of trophies, and they're really cool, but those aren't the things I talk to people about. Those aren't the things that start to matter. So a story about this guy. This is one of my cycling heroes, Gino Bartali. He's a Italian cycling superstar, and he won 2 Tour de France's, the biggest cycling race in the world, 1938, 1948, with a 10-year split in between. And also 3-time Giro d'Italia winner. Any cyclists in the room might know some of these names. Milan-San Remo 4 times. So he's a really big deal in Italy, and everybody talks about all of his wins. But the reason there's a 10-year span in between his first and last Tour de France win is because there were some world wars going on during the middle of that time. And what Gino did during that time period is what's really impressive. Cycling, and it's estimated that he saved more than 800 lives of Jewish people. So he lived in northern Italy on the German border there, and what he would do is he'd use his bike and go on long training sessions instead of going, I can't race the Tour de France. They're not having it for a while because his country's in war. He still went on his training rides, and what he would do is he would transport false documents for hundreds of miles back and forth and take them to Jewish people so that they could use the documents to travel south and get to safety. And he would roll up the documents into the tubes of his bicycle and just miles and miles, covering tons of distance. And when we stopped by the police and asked, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, I'm training. I'd go, oh, Gino Bartali, you're famous. And they'd let him go. Another tool that he was using, he'd go to the train stations as the Jewish people were trying to get south and get further away from the German border. He'd go to the train station and create a distraction because he's a superstar. Everybody wants his signature. They want to say hi to him. They want to touch him. Gino, you're amazing. And so the police would have to come over and disperse the crowds, and then people could get on the train and head south to safety. And this quote from him I really love is that some medals aren't meant to be worn on your shirt, but on your soul. So I'm going to talk about a little medal that I have on my soul right now. And if you got to see Blood Road, you got to see the film documentary world premiere this week. This is the most important ride in my life, the biggest trophy I'll ever hold on my soul. And we don't always realize the impact we can make. Like I said, we're a room full of winners, and people are always celebrating, with me, like, oh, you won this race, you did that race, that's a great inspiration. And none of us set out to be an inspiration. We don't set out to change the world. You just kind of go along and grab for that brass ring, and somewhere along the way, people say, oh, you're an inspiration, or I learned something from you, which is what this whole conference is about. And it's great to have a platform to speak from in that way. But really, my motivation has changed and evolved. So this little trip that I took down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it was a 1,200-mile ride through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And my physical goal as a cyclist was to be the first person to piece together that historical route and to ride it myself. And I did that. It's a complicated network of paths and roads. A little history lesson here, it was the supply route used by the North Vietnamese to move people and supplies through the South, eventually to take over and bring the country together as one. The personal goal is I went searching for this guy. This is my dad. He was shot down over Laos, over the Ho Chi Minh Trail in 1972. I was 3 years old. So in the middle of my bike ride, I went searching for a couple coordinates on a map. That was my little trophy I was looking for. And And the whole purpose of me going there on my bike, I didn't really know where it was leading, but it was to try to connect with him the only way that I knew how. But along the way, the trip, it stopped being about him, it stopped being about me, and it started being about something much, much bigger. This is my teammate, Huyen, Vietnamese professional cyclist. I rode with her. She was a total stranger at the start, a sister at the end. But like I said, the story became much bigger than I ever imagined. And it became a story of healing. And just something as simply as two girls riding bikes for a month together through Southeast Asia was an incredible healing and a vehicle for change. Her father served during the war. So did my father. Indirectly, they fought each other. And yet here we were riding bikes together through some amazing part of the country. It was also a trip of discovery, of a culture, of a people that were total strangers to me. And I was completely foreign to them too. The places we were going, they had never seen foreign visitors. So getting to know these people and understanding their way of life was pretty incredible. And I hope I had an impact on them. This little girl, she challenged me to a race. She's probably never seen a Vietnamese and an American female cyclist riding together, and her eyes lit up when we first met her. And a bike is universal, like we talked about at the beginning, so she could understand. And she kind of egged me on, and she didn't care that I was a world champion. And, you know, that didn't matter to her. What she saw were girls riding bikes, and I hope she went home to her mom that night and said, "You won't believe what I saw." And me telling you this story here now, it's part of the healing, and whether maybe the only thing that happened in this trip is I made an impact on that little girl and she made an impact on me, and that's enough if that's all that happened. This little guy, I speak no Laos and he speaks no English, except for I learned to say sabadi, hello, and cup chai, which means thank you. But the universal signal of a smile and a laugh, everywhere we went, these guys wanted to get on my bike, they wanted to check it out. I hope they went home and told their moms and dads what they saw that day too. This guy served during the war, and I met him on my bicycle. And during the Vietnam War, and I'll tell you a little history lesson. We call it the Vietnam War, they call it the American War. We have different history books, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of those two. And to sit and talk to this gentleman was really impactful for me. And they used the bike during the war to move supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They would load the bike up, and it could carry more than just somebody carrying rice on their back. And so they started using bikes, then elephants, then trucks. And this gentleman still had, his helmet on, and the healing that was hopefully happening is he could see that I was coming with a smile, and he welcomed me, into his place, despite our sort of complicated history. The ride created change. This woman, she invited me into her home. She lived in a place in the Penat Valley right near the Mujia Pass, which was one of the most bombed places in the world. She still lives among craters. There's bomb craters all around her village. She invited me into her home and told me the stories of living in a cave for 6 years while they waited for the bombs to stop raining down. There was no animosity. She said, "Come into my home through a translator, sit down, I'll tell you some stories." If that's not healing, I don't know what is. The discovery that happened, this is a living history along the trail. This boat here is the fuel fuselage for an F-4 fighter plane. That's the plane my dad flew. Everywhere along the trail, there are pieces of the war that have been repurposed and reused. And so we took a boat ride in one of the planes that my dad flew, or representation of that. The pain doesn't have any boundaries. They call the Ho Chi Minh Trail Blood Road because so many people died there. And what we're learning along the trail is that, fraction of the Americans who died there, you can multiply that by about 10 if you include Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia. And there is no boundary on loss or grief or pain or losing a family member. And the scars and the waste, the destruction, it's still there. Still left from a war that ended 45 years ago. But the trip was not about pain and war. It was about or death. It was about life and recovery, and you could see that everywhere. This is a bomb casing that's used as a planter. You see these everywhere in the villages. And ultimately, it was about forgiveness. But there's more work to be done, and that was a big discovery for me on this trip. I found a new clarity, a new purpose, a way to use my bike as a vehicle for change, and that I could actually do something. My dad brought me there to teach me a lesson and show me, hey, you can use your bike for good. And so I want to show you a little video. I didn't know I was going there. I didn't know what this trip was going to be about, but what ended up happening, and hopefully this is how you guys can keep your minds open to the kind of effect that you may be able to have on the world. What happened is I found my purpose along the way, and I found out what my bike was meant to do. It wasn't necessarily meant for me to go win a whole bunch of races and stack up trophies in home and have a I love me area of the house to celebrate all my wins. It wasn't about that. It's finally really clear where my bike has been taking me. In 2015, I did the most important ride of my life, a historical route down the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. I went there to try to find the place where my dad's plane was shot down during the Vietnam War. That trip changed me. It spawned an idea to take some of my friends there and open all of our eyes to a culture and some of the scars that are still there. Laos as a country has the unfortunate notoriety to be the most bombed country per capita. During the war, it's estimated that a plane load of bombs was dropped every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day, for 9 years. Approximately 30% of those bombs did not explode on impact. What that means is the country is still littered with explosives. Bringing people back here, it's twofold. It's to show them a beautiful place and experience a part of the world by bicycle that is very magical, but it's also to do my part and use my reach as an athlete to bring awareness to the message of unexploded ordnance. Yeah, we're finally riding bikes. I'm stoked. I actually can't believe we got all you guys here. Oh, it's gonna be so good. Day one, I'm where I need to be. I'm happy. Got 14 of my good friends here riding with me and go see some of the country. Single track, river crossing, first one. Yeah. This country really is a spider web of dirt paths, so the mountain bike is the perfect way to travel and the perfect way to really immerse yourself in the culture and be part of the jungle, be part of the villages. This trip is about exploration and riding our bikes in an amazing part of the world, but it's also about doing more. As we travel down the trail, it's a very visual reminder of the devastation and of the painful history that this country had to endure. Everything that's there, every piece of metal that we see is something from the Vietnam War that's being repurposed and reused for daily life.
That's this a ladder that's been made out of flare tube casings. There's the bucket they fabricated out of either flare tubing or part of airplane wing.
Bomb casings become garden planters. Scrap metal from planes is turned into boats. Bomb craters have been transformed into little ponds where fish are living and sustain life. This is good. We're in the hot zone. We're in like some really historical, starting to see bomb craters and all these little villages. You can feel the history, you feel this place. It's cool. Every rider here has donated funds to the Mines Advisory Group by being on this trip, and that's the group that is working on cleaning up these villages. The estimate right now is that at the current rate of cleanup, it will still take another 100 years to remove all of the unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War. My goal with this trip and with my efforts is to decrease that amount of time dramatically. The amount of money that we raised will actually fund a cleanup crew for 8 months.
Well, I've been all around this land just to do
To the
the best I
caves!
can.
This way to the caves,
Trying to
everybody!
find out what I was meant to do. And the faces that I see, they're as worried as can be, and it looks like they're wondering too.
Here in Laos, the caves play a big part of their history. During the war, this is where a lot of people had to live to escape the bombing and to survive. My father was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War, and he's one of the guys who was dropping bombs on Laos. And now my career has brought me full circle to find him and to find this place and to be able to do my part as an athlete and an advocate and actually clean up some of the mess that's still there.
And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound. Once again. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to leave you with that last famous, favorite Gino Bartali quote. And I didn't share this story with you to tell you about myself. I shared this story with you to encourage you as visionaries, as leaders, as game changers, as people who make a difference, to really think about what are the trophies that are going to mean something to you. And we're all taking the path less traveled. I've been lost for most of my life, and it's never a straight route if you're taking a different path. It's very circuitous. And so I'll leave you with, if you don't know where you're going and you feel a little lost, that really staying true to your core values in your business, your core values as a human, and staying really open-minded to an experience like this or who you might meet in this room, staying really open to the change that can happen if you let it. And eventually, if you do that, remember that little pyramid, then we're all going to move off that second tier and up to the top one and really start gathering the trophies that really matter that you're going to wear in your soul. And I really look forward to talking to all you guys tonight at dinner. Thanks for having me.